All right, guys. So a lot of times, depending on the state that I'm hunting, whether it had been Michigan in the past, whether it had been pressured Wisconsin, whether it be Kentucky, whether it be Ohio, Illinois, any of these states, South Dakota, there are times of the year in which you should or shouldn't probably call at deer, depending on the state that you're in. And why do I say that? Because it's completely based off of the amount of pressure that these areas see. There's certain states like Michigan, Wisconsin. I almost don't bring a grunt tube with me most of the years, or most of the days during the year. I might never bring rattling antlers, but there is a time in which you should, no matter where you're at, have some form of a call. And we're going to get into exactly how you should be calling two rut bucks today to pull them in. Let's face it, they're running around everywhere. They're keeping their distance sometimes. They're not closing the gap that you need them to close in order to get them killed. There's ways to bring these deer closer. There is strategy to this. It's not just blind grunting and hoping for the best. There's a way that you can bring these deer in. So we're going to get into that today. But before we get to that point, we're booking clients right now, anywhere from South Dakota out to Ohio, down to Tennessee. So if you guys are looking to improve your property, you're struggling this year, you're not killing your target buck, your neighbors are killing all your deer, let's get on the books. Go to whitetaillandmanagementservices.com, hit the contact tab, get a hold of me. If you want to learn about food plotting on your property, what to plant, when to plant, all those things, the timber stand improvement, how to make money on your property, all these things we're going to go over. Number two, got some codes in the description for you. You want to save some money? We got some promo codes for you. Code WLM20 at vortexoptics.com will get you money off apparel. Eurooptic.com, WLMSVTX10 will get you 10% off Vortex Optics. 10% off of optics, that's a lot of money when it comes down to it. So, how do we call in these rutting bucks? There's strategy to this. And let's face it, this time of year I get pretty excited, and in my downtime I'll watch hunting videos. And you see a lot of guys always using the grunt tube, using a grunt tube or using calls and stuff like that. And we're not going to get into the rattling today. And I guess the baseline tips that I would give you guys to who are bringing rattling antlers in the woods, I'm gonna be honest, if you're anywhere probably in Michigan, there's a few parts that I would recommend maybe rattling. Otherwise, just stay away from it, because you're gonna get inexperienced guys going out there and rattling too much, whatever else. And quite frankly, if the mature bucks or impressive deer that can actually fight are lacking, well, then you don't hear a lot of rattling, and when the deer hear it, it might spook them more than anything. So stay away from the rattling antlers if you're in those states. If you're in Southwest Wisconsin, if you're in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, those honey hole states where you can get a good chance at shooting a 140 plus every year, and you expect to, bring out the antlers, let them crack. But let's talk about the grunt tube today, because everybody's got one and everybody likes to use it. Everybody likes to blow on it when they're bored in the woods. If there was ever a time I would recommend not blind calling, and I'm going to get into the strategy a little bit more in a second, but if there was ever a time I'd recommend to not blind call, and don't get me wrong, some of you are looking at me like, Brett, you're not speaking the truth here, man. I've blind called and called some deer in. That's fair. But what I think is most likely to happen is these bucks are scent checking their does. They're using their scent checking for does. They're using their nose now more than ever. So when they're doing that, they're getting downwind of batting areas. They're getting downwind of noise. They're getting downwind of anything to scent check what's there. Is it a doe and estrus? Is it some rutting bucks? What's going on in the area? So when you blind call, meaning that you don't know that there's any deer around, and you blind call in hopes that something hears you and magically comes in, there's a good chance that a mature buck or a smarter deer or a pressured deer will cut downwind to you first, okay? So what are you doing? You're educating him. Are you going to get him killed? It's less likely. It's not impossible. So if you're going to still blind call after me telling you that, do it at your own risk. But keep in mind, if you're in a high-pressured state, what's a high-pressured state? A place where people own only 40 acres. Multiple people hunt that 40, 20, 10 acres. If you're in that category, guys, you're better to be unseen and unheard more than anything. But anyway, carry that grunt tube with you, and when that shooter buck does come in, this is how you should be calling at that deer in order to make him close the distance. The number one thing that I see people do, or the biggest screw up I see people make when a buck is cruising by and they're trying to get him to stop or come in a little bit closer so they can make the shot, is just throwing out the grunt without thinking about the situation. They throw out the grunt, and that buck might be in a wide open gap, and he might look up and he might be able to see in that area and say, what the heck, why did I hear that? And I can clearly see that there's nothing there. So the number one thing that I would recommend that you do when calling in bucks during the rut, you know, those young bucks, if that's of your interest and you want to kill smaller bucks, you can probably just get away with doing that. But otherwise, the first thing that I would do is kind of assess the situation quickly, see that deer's path of travel, and if they're going to at some point step in a pocket of brush where they can't see super well, if they're going to step behind some bigger trees, something like that, or turn their back to you, something like that, grunt at that point when they can't just pick you right off or pick off your area and pick it apart. And what that's going to do, especially if that deer is facing away or behind something, it's going to force them to resituate their body, most likely face you or look at you. And at that point, they don't even realize what happened, but you just bettered the odds considerably, because if that deer turns towards you, it is a hell of a lot easier for that deer to start walking for you. You're almost playing a mental game with this deer. You just have to do it at the right time when he can't see you, can't see your area as well. Does that mean he's 150 yards away? Possibly. Does that mean he's 47 yards away in the brush? Possibly. Basically, you just don't want them to be able to look over and be able to see everything when you grunt. If you do this, the chances of the deer's body movements or their posture, it's most likely that they're going to want to turn in and at least face you. I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to come in, but at the very least, we've already won part of that battle. If they turn themselves towards you, all they have to do is start walking at that point, and then you get your shot opportunity. So, in layman's terms, don't just call it deer just to call it deer, you know, when they're in the wide open. Strategically assess that situation over the course of the 10, 20, 30, 2, 3 seconds that you have, or even think prior, you know, if a deer gets behind that tree, that's when I'll grunt, or in that brush, that's when I'll grunt, and hopefully he'll close the distance then. Probably try and get downwind, factor that in, which way he might go based off the wind, so he tries to catch the wind and find that pocket that he's going to cross before he gets downwind to you, and kill him. So if I had to give any one tip as to how to call in bucks during November, guys, that's the one. Okay, when you see them, that's the strategy that I would most likely use. If you guys like these tips, you like these videos, you like this content, like, comment, subscribe. Always doing giveaways, and if you like free stuff, you're in the right place. See you next video.